As promised, here is the rest of my interview with Robin Stuart, talking about how she got into authoring and just more details about her road as a cybercrime author and some works that are coming up next year. Okay, again, this is Getting Into Information Security, and I'm your host, Ayman Al-Sawat. You can find other episodes at gettingintoinfosec.com. Thanks. You mentioned that you're an author, and I want to give time for that. I'd love to hear more about your endeavor as an author and what you've done in the past and some works coming up in the future.
Yeah, so after writing a couple of white papers for SANS during various certifications, I discovered that I really kind of like writing.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was between jobs at law firms, while I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, I did spend some time as a sports journalist. I'm an avid mountain biker, and I ended up writing a book called Mountain Biking for Women. And the first iteration, my first draft at it was sort of Zen and the Art of Mountain Biking.
Mm-hmm.
And I had sent that around, and I think that was actually the title of it.
Nice.
I sent it around to small presses around the country, and lo and behold, a small press in upstate New York contacted me and said, "Hey, this is great, but I want you to rewrite it completely and maybe make it a women specific," because this was in the early 90s, which was the first year of the woman. But this year of the woman occurred in the sports world, and in mountain biking in particular, the stars, so to speak, were mostly women.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so ex-pro skiers were taking to mountain biking as a way to train in the summertime, and then also utilizing some of the same skills on dry land as opposed to snow. And I was an avid mountain biker myself and gave a shot to doing some journalism on the side. I was a mountain bike mechanic, so apparently I've always kind of had a technical lean.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
So I was freelancing for a while there. So I wrote Mountain Biking for Women after the editor of the small press convinced me that it would be a good idea. And that led to getting more work in magazines, freelance work with different magazines, Mountain Biking Magazine, Bicycling, Dirt, with the bigger names in a very small world. And then when I was early on in my tech career, probably about 10 years later, that was when somebody on BugTrack, the mailing list, the old listserv, put out a call basically asking for anybody who wanted to contribute to a new textbook. And I put up my hand and said, sure, I'll write something on digital forensics if that's what you like. I talked to the editor of that, and I ended up doing exactly that. I wrote the chapter on digital evidence preservation and presentation suitable for court.
Awesome.
Kind of the marriage between my legal background and my tech background or tech experience at that time. And that book ended up being a 3-volume tome that is still a textbook today through John Wiley and Son. And
awesome.
and that the whole writing thing kind of took I had to set that aside for a while I made a living, because it's a very hard way to make a living. You get paid by the word in journalism, and it's very
wow.
like 5 cents a word. We're not talking like $1 a word. So I opted to have a real job for a while. And plus, I was really more interested in writing fiction than I was in writing nonfiction. And because of what I was doing for a living, there was more interest in me from the publishing world as a nonfiction author. And I'm like, I don't really want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of set aside that ambition while I developed my tech career. And then about 2011, I want to say, I got the bug again and wrote a novel. And it was terrible. And full of cliches, and had absolutely nothing to do with my day job. It was something I did as an escape to get out of the whole tech thing for a while.
Right.
And I ended up going to a workshop on the advice of a friend of mine who is an author. I asked her, what do I do now? What's the next step I take to become a published author in fiction? And I've just sort of kind of recreated the same dynamic that it took me through my tech career. I'm doing it again in the publishing world, where I'm looking for mentors and listening to them, and awesome. Participating in the community. Mm-hmm. And so this first workshop I went to turned out to be the craft of writing commercial fiction. And the guy who ran the program took a liking to me because I was, once again, very enthusiastic, willing to learn, and demonstrated that when he gave us advice, I did it. And both he and two literary agents just implored me to write about cybercrime.
Oh, wow.
They said, you've got the platform, as it's called, which is, the expertise, which makes it easy to sell you as an author. Because something I learned is that publishers aren't really looking for a book. They are looking for an author. They're looking for a person that they're going to invest a lot of time and money in. And so they don't want a one-hit wonder. They want somebody who's in it for the long term.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So that's why my job was so important to these people. And I'm like, okay, so I'll take a crack at it. I wrote a cybercrime novel that was a political thriller as much as it was a techno thriller, if you want to call it that. Mm-hmm. And I developed that one over about a 2-year period, kind of honing it through working with freelance editors, workshopping it with other writers that I met at different workshops, commercial workshop. And the guy who ran that first workshop that I went to has it's an outfit called Algonquian. Not to be confused with Algonquin. It's named for a region in Maryland, somewhere back east. But he puts together these workshops for the writing craft, and then also how to pitch, because pitching is a very big part of the publishing world. You don't get anywhere if you can't pitch. And pitching is basically a job interview. And that's how I look at it. And it's selling yourself and selling the book at the same time. And there were a couple of local writers' conferences that I attended where I was able to meet with literary agents and editors to kind of hone my pitch on this book that I'd written. And when I felt ready, this guy invited me to something that he does in New York 4 times a year, which is called the New York Pitch Fest, where it's just 4 days of doing nothing but pitching agents and editors and honing your pitch and fine-tuning your pitch and receiving the constructive feedback on how to make either the pitch better, the book better, or whatever, putting together the whole package.
Yeah.
And he invited like startup life. Exactly. And he invited me to go a year before I finally accepted. So there were 4 cycles that I was like, yeah, no, not yet, because I took this very, very seriously, and it was something that I didn't want to blow, because this time this was important to me. And I know from experience that you only get one shot at that first impression, and I wanted it to be a good one. So I didn't want to go until I felt ready and felt confident in my pitch and my product. Yeah. And so that I could project the confidence and the professionalism that I knew that they would be looking for. So I finally go. And they broke up the pitch groups by genre. And because I write mysteries and thrillers, I was with the mystery and thriller group. And the leader of that group was a literary agent based on the East Coast by the name of Paula Munier. She's very well known in the crime fiction community. Okay. And she was working with all of us on our pitches. And by the end of the 4 days, I got 100% requests, including from Paula herself. Wow. So every agent I talked to, every editor I talked to, they all wanted to see my book. Wow. And they all wanted to have the opportunity to work with. So I ended up signing with Paula. And that book went through, I think, 2 more revisions before she started shopping it around. And unfortunately, that shopping it around took place in fall of 2016. So it's fall of 2016, if you'll recall, was also a very hotly contested presidential election.
Oh, right.
And presidential politics were we were all being inundated. And because that particular book was dealing with presidential politics, it wasn't an election. It was about a plot to assassinate the president using a cell phone.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
How timely of a okay.
Yes, exactly. So that book is actually still out on, to the best of my knowledge, there have only been two publishing houses who turned it down, and it was they turned that book down, but they both said that they were willing to read anything else I wrote. And so I've written two more books since then. The second one I shelved because it was extremely controversial. A young adult that was about sexting, and there are rules in each publishing genre, and one of the rules of young adult is they can't be too sexy. So my agent said that it's okay to break the rules, but not for a debut. So so I needed to write something a little bit less controversial, and I jokingly said something to the effect of, what if I don't want to say what it is, but I made a joke about a very lighthearted subject, and she said, "Oh my God, that's awesome, write that." And so I did, and I'm now polishing that up. That was a year ago July, when I had this conversation. And Paula and I just met actually last week or 2 weeks, maybe it was 2 weeks, and went over a couple of changes, one of them major, then the rest minor. And we're hoping that will be my novel length debut. I'm going to be getting that into her hot little hands in early 2019.
Okay.
In the meanwhile, I am a member of the Mystery Writers of America and Sisters in Crime. And Sisters in Crime it's not just for women. They're sisters and misters. So men are invited, of course, to join. But they're basically they're communities to help promote each other, coach each other, support each other, because it's any sort of artistic endeavor. It sounds like it's something that you do alone, but it's really not. But there is a significant part of the time where you're not getting any feedback, and it's really easy to kind of wallow in self-pity or feel down because you're not getting feedback or whatever. And so Sisters in Crime and Mystery Writers of America are really great venues for being a cheerleader and having your work being cheer-led and helping each other to grow. And I'm also a volunteer expert on cybercrime topics. So I have given advice, and I do a lot of consulting with other authors on themes or what the realities are of different types of technologies and things like that. So I'm sort of their pet ask the expert type of person on topics around cybercrime. Nice. And my chapter of Sisters in Crime, Northern California chapter, is one of the few chapters that has not had their own anthology yet. And so their very first anthology, they put out a call for submissions for short stories last year. And I forget why I wasn't working on a novel, but I wasn't working on a novel at the time. I had like 2 to 3 weeks where I'm just like, I'm not really working on something right now, so what should I be doing? And that's when this short story opportunity came up. And so I have never really mastered the short form of storytelling. And so this was another case of, well, let's see if I can do it. What's the worst thing that can happen? They say no.
Right. Nice.
So, yeah. And
But they said yes.
Yes, they did. So yeah, my very first cybercrime short story got picked up in this anthology, and that will be released to the masses in the first quarter of 2019. We're hoping for January, but sometime between January and March. And the book is called Fault Lines, and it's an anthology of San Francisco themed crime fiction by Northern California authors. And my particular story is called SegFault, which is short for segment fault, which is a very common computer error.
Right.
It's basically a heist caper, but that's precipitated by a cyber event.
Yeah, I'm super excited to check it out. So 2019 seems to be
it's going to be a
hopefully to be a fun year for you.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. That's awesome. So none of your previous works are not. When you have like 10 novels out, you'll probably release some.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And actually, I wrote a mystery, my first mystery that I ever wrote, full length.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote like in the mid 90s. And it's, again, has absolutely nothing to do with technology or computers because it predated my career in that.
Mm-hmm.
But I have been brainstorming ways to resurrect it because the story itself was fun and the characters were really fun in that one. And so, I do have I've got a backlog of stories to tell.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's anything my kid read now.
Not yet.
I am. Okay.
Yeah, not yet. But when Fault Lines comes out, that will be that'll be the big my big debut to the world of fiction.
Awesome.
And it's turning out that my story in that becoming a debut via short story and anthology in particular is becoming more common. I didn't realize that because the publishing houses are very risk averse, and now more than ever, because there are so many people who are able to, self-publish or, do ebooks or whatever. So the competition has increased, which has raised the bar on what publishing houses are willing to spend and put behind a debut author. And so now with that higher bar, I'm fully confident that I will meet that challenge because I always do. But
awesome. Yeah.
I just don't stop until I do.
Yeah. Perseverance.
Exactly. But debut by anthology is becoming a new phenomenon for debut authors who are like me, trying to prove to publishers that I'm not as big a risk as you might think I am. Mm-hmm. Here's a publisher and an editor who thought that my work is good enough for this anthology. So it's sort of, once again, kind of a resume builder. And plus, really fun to do.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good insight for new and upcoming authors. I mean, I'm finding the information security field has a lot of creatives, and I'm finding it. We're really we have a rich community. So many people I'm finding out there, either artists, as far as sound artists, or authors like yourself, or other type of creatives out there. This is really cool. Yeah,
actually, I know somebody who does sculpting, and I know a couple of painters too. But yeah, I've noticed that too, that the more successful you are in the technology field, it's because you are that out-of-the-box thinker. You're non-linear. And that really does help, especially because one of the things that attracted me to this field in the first place is that it's always changing. So you have to be kind of fluid in the way you look at the world.
Yeah.
And I'm finding the same in the writing community as well, that because tastes and pop culture are always changing, that again is a very dynamic field. And that is one of the attractions for me there too, that it's one of those things where you never stop learning, and anybody who says they know it all is lying. And it's true for both fields. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Robin, thank you for coming onto the show. I really appreciate your time, and I found it wonderful talking to you and learning about your experience.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Okay, again, this is Getting Into Information Security, and I'm your host, Ayman El-Sawat. You could find other episodes at gettingintoinfosec.com. Thanks. Bye-bye.